For more than a century, the story of the first Americans seemed settled. According to the traditional Clovis first model, humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into Alaska around 13,000 years ago before spreading south through an ice-free corridor. Distinctive fluted Clovis spear points discovered near Clovis, New Mexico, became the defining evidence for this theory, and generations of textbooks presented it as established fact. Yet over the last several decades, a growing number of archaeological discoveries have steadily challenged that narrative. Instead of a single migration occurring 13,000 years ago, evidence now suggests that humans may have reached the Americas thousands of years earlier through multiple routes. One of the most influential discoveries came from the Paisley Caves in south-central Oregon. Unlike many prehistoric sites that rely mainly on stone tools, Paisley preserved an unusual form of evidence: ancient human coprolites or fossilized human waste. The dry conditions inside the caves protected organic material that still contained human mitochondrial DNA. Genetic analysis identified Native American founding haplogroups, directly linking the samples to the ancestors of indigenous peoples living in the Americas today. Even more remarkable were the radiocarbon dates obtained through accelerator mass spectrometry. Multiple independent tests consistently placed the material at more than 14,000 years old, over 1,000 years earlier than the accepted Clovis timeline. Because the DNA came directly from human remains rather than nearby artifacts, the findings became one of the strongest pieces of evidence that people occupied North America before Clovis culture emerged. While Paisley Caves attracted worldwide attention, it was not the first site to question the traditional timeline. Decades earlier, excavations at Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in western Pennsylvania had already suggested a much older human presence. Beginning in the 1970s, archaeologist James Adavajo carefully excavated the shelter layer by layer, uncovering stone tools, hearths, plant remains, and animal bones. Radiocarbon dating indicated human occupation between approximately 16,000 and 19,000 years ago. These dates directly contradicted the Clovis first model, but the findings were met with intense skepticism. Critics argued that contamination had altered the samples or that the dating methods were unreliable. The debate became so heated that researchers coined the term Clovis primacy syndrome to describe the reluctance within parts of the archaeological community to accept evidence predating Clovis. Although controversy continues, Meadowcroft remains one of the most significant pre-Clovis archaeological sites in North America. Additional discoveries in Oregon strengthened the growing case. At Rimrock Draw Rock Shelter, archaeologists uncovered stone tools, extinct animal remains, and volcanic ash layers that created an exceptionally reliable chronological record. A distinctive layer of ash from a known eruption of Mount St. Helens, dated to roughly 15,500 years ago, served as a natural timestamp. Beneath this ash lay fragments of camel and ancient bison teeth, along with a carefully crafted stone tool made from orange chalcedony. Laboratory analysis dated the animal remains to approximately 21,000 to 22,000 years ago. Since the tool was found beneath the dated remains, researchers concluded that human activity at the site likely occurred even earlier. The artifact itself showed heavy wear from repeated sharpening and long-term use, suggesting it belonged to someone who carried it for years before abandoning it. Unlike Clovis spear points, these tools belong to the Western stem tradition, a separate technological culture characterized by narrow blades, weak shoulders, and rounded bases. Their existence indicated that different groups with different stoneworking traditions occupied Western North America long before Clovis hunters appeared. Perhaps the most visually striking evidence emerged from White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Researchers studying ancient lake beds discovered dozens of fossilized human footprints preserved in gypsum sediment along the shores of what was once Lake Otero. The tracks included adults, teenagers, and children walking, running, and carrying loads across muddy ground. Initial radiocarbon dating of seeds embedded within the footprint layers produced ages between 21,000 and 23,000 years. Because critics questioned whether aquatic plants might have absorbed older carbon from groundwater, scientists conducted additional studies using conifer pollen and other organic materials unaffected by the same problem. Independent dating methods repeatedly produced nearly identical results, reinforcing the conclusion that humans occupied the region during the height of the last glacial maximum, when massive ice sheets still covered much of North America. The footprints also intersected tracks left by mammoths and giant ground sloths, placing humans alongside Ice Age megafauna in a landscape previously believed to have been inaccessible. If confirmed, White sands represents one of the strongest pieces of evidence that humans lived in North America thousands of years before the opening of the supposed ice-free migration corridor. Even more controversial is the Cerruti Mastodon site in Southern California. During routine highway construction, workers uncovered the remains of a mastodon whose bones displayed spiral fractures typically associated with deliberate breakage while the bones were still fresh. Nearby lay several large cobbles interpreted by researchers as hammerstones and anvils. Uranium-thorium dating consistently placed the site at approximately 130,700 years old, far older than any accepted evidence for modern humans in the Americas. The extraordinary age immediately generated intense debate. Supporters argued that the fracture patterns and associated stones pointed toward deliberate processing by an unknown hominin species, while critics suggested that natural geological processes or construction equipment might explain the damage. Because no human bones or unmistakable stone tools accompanied the mastodon remains, the site remains one of archaeology's most disputed discoveries. Nevertheless, if the original interpretation were eventually confirmed, it would require a complete reassessment of human migration into the New World, potentially involving archaic human relatives long before Homo sapiens became widespread. As archaeological evidence accumulated, researchers also began rethinking migration routes. Rather than relying exclusively on the Bering Land Bridge, many scientists proposed a Pacific coastal migration. During the Ice Age, lower sea levels exposed extensive coastlines rich in marine resources, allowing small groups to travel gradually by boat while following fish, shellfish, and other coastal food sources. Although much of this ancient coastline now lies submerged beneath the Pacific Ocean, genetic studies lend support to the idea of multiple migration waves. Certain mitochondrial DNA lineages indicate that Native American ancestry cannot be explained by a single movement of people. Instead, evidence suggests several distinct migrations occurring over thousands of years, including groups that may have traveled along the Pacific Rim before later populations entered through Beringia. Similarities in some stone tool technologies found in Eastern Asia and Western North America have also encouraged researchers to investigate possible cultural connections, although these similarities remain the subject of ongoing debate. Discoveries elsewhere in the world further expanded ideas about ancient human mobility. On the Mediterranean island of Crete, archaeologists uncovered stone tools dating back at least 130,000 years and possibly much earlier. Since Crete has remained isolated by water for millions of years, any humans reaching the island must have crossed open sea using some form of watercraft. These findings challenged the long-held belief that early humans lacked the ability to undertake significant sea voyages. If archaic human species possessed basic seafaring technology hundreds of thousands of years ago, then coastal migrations elsewhere become more plausible than previously imagined. Together, discoveries from Paisley Caves, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter, Rim Rock Draw, White Sands, and other archaeological sites illustrate how scientific understanding evolves as new evidence emerges. While many questions remain unresolved, few archaeologists today continue to argue that Clovis people were unquestionably the first inhabitants of the Americas. Instead, the growing consensus favors a far more complex history involving multiple migrations, different technologies, and occupations extending well beyond the once-accepted 13,000-year timeline. Some sites enjoy broad acceptance, while others remain highly controversial and require additional verification. Yet each excavation contributes another piece to a puzzle that is still incomplete. Future discoveries, improved dating techniques, underwater archaeology, ancient DNA analysis, and continued collaboration with indigenous communities will likely reshape our understanding even further. Rather than revealing a simple story of one migration and one culture, the archaeological record increasingly portrays the peopling of the Americas as a long, dynamic process involving diverse populations adapting to changing climates and landscapes over tens of thousands of years. The search for humanity's earliest footsteps in the New World is far from over, and every new excavation has the potential to rewrite another chapter of one of history's greatest mysteries.